Now, it's been over a year since the deadly Cyclone Idai, and the situation seems to be just as bad. Idai struck Mozambique, Zimbabwe and Malawi, claiming more than 600 lives and displacing over 2 million people. Thousands are still struggling to rebuild their lives. It's also estimated that millions of rands are needed to assist those affected. My guest, Khatija Nxedlana, from the International Committee of the Red Cross, is with me now. Khatija, good to have you with us. You were there in Mozambique just a few weeks ago, and you were also there immediately after the cyclone. What's the situation like at the moment?
Well, firstly, thank you so much for having me. As you mentioned, I was in Mozambique just about 3 weeks ago, and what I can tell you is that a lot of the areas that were affected by last year's cyclone are once again experiencing flooding. Many of the areas are inaccessible by road. We often had to ditch our vehicle and walk the remaining kilometers to the communities. Fortunately, the families were moved to higher lands following the cyclone. So while still facing many challenges, they are in a better place to be able to tackle some of the climate shocks that are frequent in Mozambique. I think what's important is that while we mark the 1-year commemoration this weekend, for the families 1 year is just not enough. It's not enough to begin rebuilding the pieces of your life, and it's certainly not enough to mourn and grieve the loss of a loved one.
Very true. I want to stick on the agricultural factor. We're looking at some of the small-scale farmers there. There were efforts to replant about 700,000 hectares. Those were scampered as well because of this recent flooding that you're talking about, weren't they?
Yes, that's right. And that's one of the key areas that we focus on as the ICRC. Our approach was a multifaceted one. In the immediate aftermath of the cyclone, we focused on the urgent needs, which includes providing food, which we did in coordination with the World Food Programme, and then also providing access to healthcare, access to water and sanitation, shelter kits and housing kits for the communities. Our approach then shifted to a long-term approach where we provided seeds and farming tools to the farmers to be able to enable families to start planting their seeds again, growing their crops again, and also to sustain themselves in the long term. We also assisted families to reconnect with separated family members. One of the aspects that's often forgotten in the disaster response is that of forensics, and that's because it's something that we don't like to think about, death.
Just expand on that for us.
Right.
Forensics.
So, obviously we know that over 1,000 people lost their lives due to the cyclone. Someone has to be the ambassador. Someone has to represent the deceased. So we had our forensics teams out in the field, helping local authorities, helping community leaders, helping families recover the remains of their loved ones, and also offer dignified and respectful burials. There's one case in particular that I'll never forget, and it's that of 16-year-old Faustina Araújo. Her family had reported her missing for 2 weeks, and local community members found her body lying in the middle of a lake. Now, they called on our forensics team, knowing that we were working in the area, and our forensics team was able to recover her body from the lake and offer her a dignified and respectful burial. Now, her family was actually with us on the scene at that very moment, and they were able to identify her immediately. So it was literally within a couple of hours, we went from recovery to burial within a matter of hours. So you can imagine absolutely heartbreaking scenes. But as painful as it was, the family was able to get just a semblance of closure at knowing where their loved one is buried, at having a gravesite to be able to visit, to go back to and pay their respects. And that's one of the areas that's very important for us as the ICRC. We believe that every family has the right to know where their loved one is.
Very true. One of the biggest problems, I'm sure, has got to be the capacity of all the governments. It's not just Mozambique, it's Zimbabwe and Malawi as well that were affected. Talk to us about that.
Yes, so in all 3 Southern African countries, we provided services to reconnect separated family members. Many families were separated from their children, their mothers, their sisters, their brothers, fathers. And we had a website where you could register a missing relative or someone could mark themselves as safe and alive. This was enabling communities to be able to find missing relatives. Obviously, we know that the hardest hit area was Mozambique, but we cannot forget the impact that the cyclone had on communities in Zimbabwe and Malawi.
Yeah, it was very devastating. So 1 year on as well, and unfortunately there was was hit by another cyclone after that, which was Kenneth as well. So it's not very easy for the country of Mozambique at the present moment, including Malawi and Zimbabwe. Khatija Nxedlana from the International Committee of the Red Cross, thank you so much for giving us an update.
Thank you.
All right, and keep up the good work.